Hi, everyone. Thanks to everyone who's joining live today for our live webinar discussion hosted by the Reuters Events Pharma team. Today's discussion will cover the topic Elevate Omnichannel Engagement in a Value-Based, Personalized Healthcare Era. I'm going to cover some formal introductions for the panel in a minute, but quickly just wanted to highlight that this webinar is being ran in conjunction with two in-person events. One of which will be hosted in Europe, one of which will be hosted in the US. I'm aware that we have a global audience today, so I just wanted to pitch both to you just quickly at the top of the call. For those based in the US, Reuters Events Pharma USA will be hosted on the 18th and 19th of March in Philadelphia. For those based in Europe, Reuters Events Pharma Pharma Europe 2025 will be hosted on the 9th to the 11th of April in Barcelona. These two separate events will both unite over 1,200 thought leaders in commercial, marketing, medical, patient engagement, market access, real-world evidence, data, and digital health to all come together under one roof to deliver purposeful progress. We'll send you the brochure for these two events in the coming days for your viewing pleasure, so make sure to take a look at your inbox and look out for that if you're interested. Now, back to today's webinar. I'm delighted to introduce to you today's panel. Tomas Ruzicka is an Associate Director of Field Engagement and Country Customer Experience at Novartis. Gaurav Lalwani is a Global Senior Director of Content and Omnichannel Marketing Operations at GlaxoSmithKline. And finally, today's moderator, Donna Judd, is a Medical Channel Strategy and Engagement Lead, US Medical Affairs at Pfizer. I want to emphasize that this session is open for questions from the audience. So if you have any burning questions for the panel, please don't hesitate to pop it in the Q&A function. And I'll now hand over to Donna for formal introductions. Over to you, Donna.
Thank you so much, Noah. Thank you. And hi, everyone. My name is Donna Judd. And as just noted, I am the Medical Channel Strategy and Engagement Lead in US Medical Affairs at Pfizer. And I am based in Pennsylvania, just outside of Philadelphia. I hold a PhD in biomedical science, and my career over the past 15 years or so in the pharma industry has spanned the medical communication agency world, then joining Pfizer as a marketer, and over the past 5 years or so, navigating the world of medical affairs, which has been a very interesting frontier, especially since the pandemic. So my current work is centered around elevating engagement across channels in medical affairs, really designing integrated customer engagement journeys that connect both live and digital channels, with a focus on leveraging digital to amplify the work of our field teams and to extend the reach to those we can't see face to face. And so it's really a pleasure to be joined today by these two esteemed panelists who will introduce themselves in just a moment to begin a discussion centered around three main objectives. So first, how we can become that trusted partner to build long-term relationships with HCPs and integrate personalization into your customer engagement journeys. Next, how we integrate digital platforms and tools to effectively capture and disseminate field insights. And finally, balancing new digital engagement channels, thinking about your field force and how you should appropriately distribute resources for the best return on investment. So lots of topics that I'm very passionate about. And before we begin, I'd just like to note that I am, again, an employee of Pfizer. However, the perspective and opinions I'll share with you today are my own, based on my own career experience. So let's get started. I'd like each of the panelists to introduce themselves and provide some background on how these objectives are relevant to their roles. So let's get started with Gaurav, please.
Thank you, Donna. Really good to be here. It's fantastic to meet the peers in the industry and see what's keeping us awake at night. I'm based in Singapore, so it's 11 p.m. here. But still excited to be here with you all. I look after, as Donna said, global content and omni-channel marketing operations at GSK. We've been on a real journey to be able to move into accelerated omni-channel marketing across our brands, across our markets. I run a centralized team which helps to enable omni-channel marketing, everything from content implementation to omni-channel delivery, analytics, as well as optimization. And I think our journey has not been a short one. We've been on a long journey. As I'm sure all of you understand, in the healthcare industry, it does take time to get to where we are. But I think it's a really exciting time to be in the industry at this stage, and I would love to share some more thoughts.
Wonderful, thank you. Now, Thomas, please.
Hello, everyone. This is Tomas Ruzicka. I'm really pleased to be here with you and really looking forward to the discussion. Actually, recently I have counted my 15th year in pharmaceutical industry, and most of the time I spent in commercial excellence functions. I also counted that I have been around more than 10 different brand launches. I was happy to be around more than 10 brand launches across more than 5 therapeutic areas, supporting different teams in commercial excellence, including building omnichannel approach, upskilling. And as a person, I treat myself as someone who is always looking beyond the numbers. As we are putting together best practices, we look after technology, processes, and also human factor. So that's something which always excites me, and it's a part of my passion. And beyond that, I'm a happy father of Gen Z, which keeps me being thrown out of balance quite often, and that's also pours quite a lot of energy into myself. So again, looking forward to the discussion, and I'll be presenting here my own personal opinions. So that's a little disclosure at the beginning. Over to you, back, Donna.
Thanks, Thomas. So thank you both. We really have a wonderful mix of experience to contribute to the discussion today. So I'd like to kick off with somewhat of a buzzword, personalization. And Gaurav, let's start with you. So what are some of the strategies you and your teams have used to integrate personalization into your engagements in order to build that trust with healthcare professionals?
Yeah, and I'll maybe start from the outside, given that I've spent a couple of decades outside of the pharma industry before I moved in here. So personalization as a concept is actually not new. If you look at the B2B world, technology companies have been masters at personalization, creating attitudinal segments and personas, being able to ensure that you have real well-defined segments which are not just based on behaviors but also attitudes. You have channel preferences, you understand how the audience is reacting to the content, and then you start personalizing content, right? So I think the fundamental and the principles of how we are approaching personalization, I would say, are very similar to how other industries have done it, but I think it's a bit new to pharmaceutical, right? Because we've always had a one-to-many kind of approach. But now what we're seeing is across the industry, healthcare professionals are receiving more and more emails, right? And on an average, there was an industry study that was done in Europe recently that said that HCPs on an average receive close to 30 emails in a week from pharmaceutical companies. That's a lot. This is 3 times more than what other B2B industries use as email engagement. So basically, there's a lot of content being thrown at healthcare professionals. So I think the real opportunity is to be able to identify what the real need is of the HCP. And we talk a little bit about value exchange. It's really about what is the value that we are generating for the healthcare professional. And based on that, you're able to then personalize the content based on the needs, based on the behaviors, and based on the triggers. And today, I think we have some great technology. So I think personalization is a combination of a few things. It's a combination of your understanding of the audience, which is a great starting point to build the right segments. It's the ability to create the right content for that right audience. And then it's also the ability to use technology to further personalize based on open rates, click-through rates, to be able to ensure that you're able to almost reach to an n equals 1 level but leveraging technology. I don't think the industry is here yet, but I think that is the ambition that any company that aims for personalization hopes to achieve.
Yeah, sure. And I think I couldn't agree more. And from my perspective, in my sort of my current world of medical affairs, personalization, again, in face-to-face engagements is nothing new. Understanding where a physician is in their knowledge journey. But in the digital space and how to meet the needs of that specific HCP in the N=1, as you mentioned, we're still learning. We're starting to integrate channel and content affinity data into our customer journeys much more regularly, and being able to implement those strategies that are actually aligned with data, A/B testing to see what resonates. And certainly our early data shows that more personalized, whether in terms of channel, format, platform, the better the engagement in terms of meeting our objectives for enhanced learning or getting that physician to come along the journey with us. And I think that comes from meeting their preferences, but also building that trust that we understand them and really we respect the time they're using to engage with us. So it kind of goes both ways. So let's talk a little bit more about the customer engagement journey, if we could. So in this seemingly infinite array of touch points that we have available to deliver this information, how can we design a customer engagement journey that's connected across both live and digital touch points? And along with that, how are you integrating digital tools and analytics to meet customers where they are and kind of capture and disseminate field insights to enhance that engagement? So Thomas, please, if we could start with you.
Yeah, thank you. Well, very complex question at the beginning. Let's start with the design of the customer engagement journey and some key elements of that. And already has been said, let's start with really understanding the customer preferences, understanding the customer journey and the touch points we have with the audience, which is absolutely key and essential in actually setting up a connected experience which is seamless for the customer. I would also here add another point, which is availability of modular content, right? If you want to keep engagement throughout the customer journey, we are addressing different pain points, we are addressing different needs, and we need to have that in terms of the content available, which talks to the need and helps actually to progress to the next step. And last point I will mention here is the seamless data flow between the cross-functional teams within the organization, so that the data about the customer experience, customer history or presence is readily available in the platforms to learn and adapt.
Wonderful. I couldn't agree more. Gaurav, I'm interested in your thoughts on this topic.
Yeah, I'm very passionate about omnichannel, as you can tell, right? Coming outside of from outside of pharma into pharma, we had a range of channels that we could work with, right? You can imagine in the CPG industry, you have TikTok and Instagram and all these like chat platforms, e-commerce. There's like limitless amount of channels you can interact with. And I think there is a huge opportunity for us to think a few things through with the HCP. One is a push versus pull strategy. One of the things I've learned recently is that there are a lot of HCPs that are searching for content, right? So are we playing to win on search, or are we just pushing our content out there through emails? So I think there's a bit of a reverse strategy to think about as well on how we can really play to win on search. The other thing that I think about a lot is if you think of us, right, HCPs are human beings, right? And we have so many amazing experiences and digital experiences. You think of, how we interact with Alexa, how we interact with Google, how we're interacting with podcasts on Spotify. I think it's important that we really look to expand our channels, right? And we've been increasingly looking at chat as a How do we ensure that we're looking at new engagement platforms? We've seen some great engagements there, and then surprisingly, they come from kind of, not always the US. They come from other markets, we've seen China, we've seen some of the Southeast Asian markets, Latin America. So a lot of our global markets are responding really well to chat. The other thing we are looking at is podcasts. We're seeing, there is a lot of opportunity for us to use podcasts to explain science in a simple way, versus kind of go through loads and loads of pages and heavy PDFs. There's a more digestible way to interact and create a bit of a longer experience with the healthcare professionals. I think, just to sum it up, I think it's about creating more pull experiences, connecting your journey across touch points, and using in some cases touch points which are more used more often with people, like chat, mobile, and finding native ways in which we can deliver content through those platforms more easily.
Yeah, I think those are great points. And I really liked what you said about search and sort of thinking about it differently. Even though it's been around for a long time, that doesn't mean we can't still innovate in the ecosystem of new channels that are coming. But to me, I mean, just to add what both of you have said, analytics and integration of AI to me is really the future. Wherever we can knit together data sources to show that integrated view of engagement, that's really what's going to help to move the needle. And at least on the medical side, as I mentioned, we're newer to this, but I do find the direct orchestrated connections between those live and digital channels really are still more in the experimental stages or the newer stages, but that's absolutely the future. And in the current state, just really communication is key between our live field teams and what's happening in the digital space, so the right hand knows what the left is doing. I really think it's important for the field colleagues to have an understanding of what messaging is taking place around them, whatever the channel, but also to have an appreciation for where they fit into the journey. Every channel we have has value. With the field, as our live channel, arguably the most important and valuable, but how does that whole 360 view look around them so we can amplify all of our messaging? So that to me is the key, and analytics will be able to pull all of that together. So I guess we've heard so much about some of your views about these customer engagement journeys, but let's move on a little bit to an area that might be a little bit more challenging. Thomas, let's talk a little bit about how you think resources can be distributed between digital and more traditional field engagement channels to maximize your return on investment and impact on engagement and, of course, patient outcomes. So tell me a little bit about that.
Again, very interesting question. Traditional channels and digital channels, I like that. Let's a bit turn it around. We have, on average, if we look at the statistics, like still 95% of all our interactions through live channels. We have sales teams in place. We keep live interactions, and there is a reason for that. And the question we should ask ourselves is, okay, what actually do we really have the sales teams for? And one of the answers might be because of facilitating the decision-making process, because of some topics are simply complex, need discussion, and takes time. That's why actually we have those teams. So, okay, we can have a look at the life cycle of the brand, the journey, but the key is how to distribute the digital and live channel lies within answering the question, what is the role of a sales professional or commercial professional in facilitating that process? And also, all the digital channels are now perceived as complementary, actually not completing, but really complementing the customer experience. We have definitely different profiles of customers. Segmentation can divide our customer base into those who consume the content on their own and prefer the cold channels, self-consumption. Other customers might prefer a live contact and discussion. And we are here to understand based on the data and actually set up our operations according to that.
Yeah, wonderful. I mean, I also thinking about the question of impact and how you actually measure impact. I sometimes I'm a bit jealous of our sales and commercial colleagues, as impact, is related to prescription and growth of market share. And on the medical side, sometimes impact is more difficult to measure. We don't tie our activities to prescription data. But I'm often energized when I think about, that challenge, because I think we need to tie our impact aligned to the reason that medical affairs exists, really to deliver clinical data to our physicians, like what they need to understand our medicines and guide that appropriate treatment to drive the best outcomes for patients. And we're starting to understand a little bit more about leading indicators, such as numbers of engagements, as a guide for how we're doing, but also depth of engagement, how long someone has spent reading something in the digital space, how many repeat visits we've had in the field. But I think we're also thinking about impact in a bit of a different way, again, integrating analytics in terms of measuring behavior change. And in clinical practice, things like adherence to guidelines or improvement in diagnosis rates, things that we can measure in the clinical space, and taking all of that together to inform investment in the appropriate channel mix, right? Because it is that balance of the complementary channels that enhance the engagement and kind of deliver on what we need for physicians. So yeah, I think it's one of the challenges that we all have in terms of where we make those investments. And I was going to say that's like one of my favorite areas to talk about, but now I'm really going to get to my favorite area, because I think that this is probably something we share across the board in our respective companies, but the appropriate collaboration between all of the parties interested in engaging with healthcare professionals. So the collaboration between marketing and medical affairs teams in order to maximize engagement and outcomes. So how can the work of marketing and medical affairs be united to transform omnichannel engagement? So how can we collaborate more effectively, but compliantly? And what sort of change management might be needed across the enterprise to realize the true value of this? So Tomas, I'll start with you, and then Gaurav, I'll want to hear your thoughts as well.
Yeah, when raising this question, Donna, it is immediately coming up to my mind a breaking the silos and changing the mindset. I still believe personally that working for pharma, we are on the same mission. We want to save patient lives. We want to contribute to the health of the society, but still commercial and medical seem to be still collaborating, but a bit siloing as well. And the long-term solution to that is actually having even more intense collaboration within cross-functional teams, working on one customer journey. There is no medical customer journey, no commercial customer journey, there's just one customer journey. And having a holistic approach to the content being provided to the customer, whatever the function is responsible as an author or the function which delivers the content to the customer. This is, for me, the solution.
Yeah, wonderful. And Gaurav, if you'd like to comment.
Yeah, and Donna and really, Thomas, I like to pick up on what you both said, right? So, Donna, when you spoke very passionately about medical affairs and the role of medical affairs, right? The role, the purpose is very well defined, right? It's very different from the commercial purpose, and I think, as Thomas rightly says, I think it's important to ensure that we think of a consumer journey which is truly thinking of one one person versus kind of thinking this is how I'll communicate as medical, this is how I'll communicate with commercial. But also at the same time, I think there are really the lines are very clear between medical and commercial from a content standpoint, right? So I think it's a very delicate dance, and what I would really ensure that the teams think about, like as we work with multiple markets, different businesses, and I think every market is in a slightly different stage of sophistication when it comes to omni-channel. It's very important to kind of be clear about the lines and how to ensure that the lines are clearly drawn, but ensure that people are coming in with the best intention, right? And I think what we try and do is, if you put the patient at the center, right, and if you think of what's the impact on the patient, so if you have clear guided medical communication, medical affairs to the HCPs, which is in the right way complemented with the commercial content, as long as you're not blurring the lines and having one go into the other, I think you'll have the right outcome.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more. I think, of course, we always try to assume best intent, and I think for medical, I mean, some of the areas that we're currently exploring with omnichannel engagement involves channels and approaches that have been traditionally considered quote unquote marketing, right? And so the appropriate awareness of what everyone's doing across the organization in these channels becomes really important. And the rationale for the independent voice of medical on these channels versus marketing has to be very well developed and agreed on and aligned on as an organization, so everyone's on the same page. And so there are guardrails, of course, to maintain compliance and integrity. But I think there's also value in shifting the mindset of what's considered marketing versus medical as distinct entities, especially when we think about data on affinities for, some of the channel affinity data we referred to before. Just because we're medical doesn't mean we shouldn't know our customer. We shouldn't meet them where they are. And so it's sort of an enterprise problem, not a marketing or a medical problem. And I think there's also a role for all parties to proactively influence kind of what they want the future enterprise infrastructure to look like, or whether that be guidances, whether that be analytic infrastructure, whether that be regulatory infrastructure, in order that it meets our needs. We grow together, and that's where I think there's going to be setting up for the success of the future, because otherwise things become disjointed and dominated by one of the parties. So we're trying to have those appropriate discussions as more cross-functional teams. And Thomas, I think you referred to those cross-functional teams as being some of the most important ways to work in this complex environment that we're in. So anything else to add on that, gentlemen? No?
Summed it up very well, Donna. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So I see a few questions coming in the chat already. Please continue to add your questions and we'll discuss those in a few moments. But I wanted to move on to much more of a practical element on executing omnichannel strategy within a global enterprise, given all the complexities of a global strategy, complexities of local markets, et cetera. Gaurav, let's start with you. How do you balance global strategy with local market execution to ensure you get the most effective outcome?
Yeah, so that's firstly, I think maybe it's the most difficult problem that a lot of pharma companies face today, because it's always which direction your pendulum will go to, right? So how far do you want to stay towards global? How far do you want to go to local? I think, and it's an answer which is, the balance is perfect, but how do you really maintain the balance and be right in between? So I think firstly, you need to have you need to have the right strategy that sits at the global team to be able to ensure that the brand strategy, the brand direction, the commercial strategy, the medical strategy is really well aligned with the ambition, right? And that strategy has to flow into content, right? And your content needs to have the right foundations. What's the brand character? What does the brand stand for? How do you differentiate it? How do you get a competitive advantage? How do you communicate science in an effective way? How do you communicate it across channels, right? So it needs to be really thinking through some of those really complex questions. But by the time it comes to the local market, you'll have a lot of nuances. But the point is, you can't think your strategy through right from scratch. You need to be able to use the strategy and leverage the strategy that's already been created. Leverage the core and the base that's already been created, but then you need to find a way to maximize, personalize, right? So it won't be that the local just picks up what global creates and then runs with it. It's really about how do you create the global content in a way that is scalable, right? So it's almost like we think about it as it's like what's right in the core and the center, and then how do you start building around it. And that model seems to be um, kind of helping us balance it out. It's never perfect, but I think what's always going to be a challenge is going too extreme on one side or the other.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And Thomas, I'm interested in your thoughts on this as well.
Yeah. I had a chance to be at both sides of that equation. I actually being in a global team responsible for a global strategy, also coming from a country, having been in a position of the one who receives the global strategy and implements, right? So again, I will turn it around. So as a person in the country or in the region, I'm interested in having the content and delivery having a relevance for market, right? Talking to my needs, having it at the right moment, really flexible, and also receiving an ongoing support. And there is also always a conflict, global and local, to find a fine balance between what is actually the core delivery and to what extent the global campaign, global strategy is going to be adapted. So there's no simple answer to that. There is no one size fitting all, but at least finding the minimum of delivery agreed with key markets, key stakeholders covering 80% of, we will be never perfect, is maybe the answer to have a good global solution with potential to be adopted well by the countries.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was just going to say that I couldn't agree more. I think like everything, it comes down to that communication and understanding what the need, maybe understanding the end user and figuring that in for early and often, even though you can't please everyone.
Yeah, co-creation is a key, right? Having key stakeholders around the table when putting up the strategy, agreeing on the minimum content and agreeing on the rules, how to adapt and localize, will not make anyone happy, but definitely will make most of the people happier.
Right. I mean, the involvement of markets and asking for their input and all being at the same table, facilitates that trust also that we continue to talk about. And I think in any good global plan, providing that flexibility in the framework so it can feasibly be adapted to local regulations. I mean, it's easier said than done, of course, but it really comes with having a forum where markets can provide that feedback. And I also think that in terms of this global versus local balance, being clear and firm about prioritization. So in other words, which markets based on business objectives are meant to be armed with the resources needed to effectively execute on these strategies, and making sure everyone knows it and is aligned on it. And again, easier said than done, but I have found that is a very helpful way to ensure seamless implementation.
Yes.
And I just wanted to maybe go ahead, Thomas, after you.
Just a quick remark to that. What is being underestimated quite often is the change management element in putting in place all those strategies. All those resources into communication, into understanding and alignment. This is maybe if I shall name one of the biggest potentials for improvement in general, whatever is moving from global to local is really the change management element.
Yeah.
Well said, Thomas. You stole a few words out of my mouth, but you said it in a much more articulate way than I would. But I wanted to add one more point. So I think change management, as you said, is absolutely necessary, and it has to constantly be monitored. So when you talk about global to local, you really want to understand what's the content that's actually being utilized locally. It's not just creating content for the sake of content. So I think the management, the data, the operational data around that is extremely important. The insight around that is even more important. And you can imagine, you can see, there's a piece of content that every market is using, and there's a piece of content that no market is using. It's a lot to be said about the content that's being created, right? It's not about just the operational processes. There will always be certain content that markets will gravitate more towards. But the other thing I think about a lot, which is as equally undervalued, is the strategy, right? I feel in our worlds, I feel like differentiation is a function of great strategy. How do you communicate effectively? How do you have your data, your brand values, your scientific evidence communicated in the most effective, efficient way for your customer, right? And a strategy is really a deep understanding of your customer or customers, given you have now various segments. You have a deep understanding of your key markets that you operate in, and you have a key understanding of the dynamics in which you operate in to be able to ensure that you differentiate. And I think today we get very caught up with, oh, we want more content, we want more personalization, we want it cheaper, we want it faster, we want more omni-channel. But no matter how good your omni-channel technology is, if you don't have the fuel to fill it in with the right information and the most strategic way of differentiating your brand, right, it's not going to be effective. So I think just there's a lot to be said about the value of strategy upstream and how it really flows through the system.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do agree. We throw around the term strategy, and global strategy, and I feel like that's again about the communication of making sure your strategy also resonates at the local level. And if there's a disconnect there, sort of like you have one hand tied behind your back before you start. So it's very, very insightful comment there. So I've come to my last question, but there are many questions that have been coming in. So I'm going to ask this one question, and then we'll shift over to the questions that have come in for us, which kind of span a whole spectrum. So that'll be fun to take a look at those. So before we go into that, Gaurav, why don't we start with you? I just kind of wanted to lead us a little future thinking about what is the future of omnichannel marketing? What kind of trends are you seeing in the landscape of personalized HCP engagement? What are you most excited about?
So, and it takes me back to a bit of a marketing event that I attended back in June 2024. We went to Cannes, and we saw, creative awards. We saw all the kind of tech companies, creative agencies, entrepreneurs, artists, and everyone is talking about AI. So one thing that stuck out for me was that AI is not going to be a competitive advantage if you don't use it strategically. And I think everyone is excited about AI. We're all excited about AI, but I think it's really important to think about how it will shape how our future will evolve. Right? And I think there are about 5 things that I feel will change in the pharmaceutical industry. The first one, I think, is as we get more data, we're becoming more and more data rich. Data is oil, but without insights, right, it's crude oil. So I think insights and the power of building a differentiated brand will become more important than ever, because you're going to have a lot more content. You'll have more people engaging through more messaging, through more platforms. But I think the differentiation of how you think through strategically from your audience standpoint with an insight and building the right brand to connect with the audience, that foundational capability is going to start. There's going to be a resurgence. The second thing I am really excited about is As I said, there's a lot of great strategy and content coming from the global team that will continue. But I think AI to drive personalization is going to really help us to accelerate the way we connect with audiences. So it's not just AI to create everything for us from scratch, but it's about how it enables personalization. The third thing I feel is really about how search is going to kind of be the new uh, kind of engagement platform. There's a lot more search that's going on across industries, and I think a bit beyond search. I think about like how my kids are searching, how my parents are searching today. They don't type anymore. Everyone's asking Google and Alexa. So what's the game there? The other thing I think about is we love augmented reality and metaverse and spatial reality. That reality is becoming a lot closer to us because of the cost of technology, right? And the bandwidth increase. And you're seeing countries like India, Brazil, that are getting 5G and glasses for $20 and $30. So there's going to be a bit of a democratization of how augmented reality and spatial reality plays a role. And last but not the least, again, a big passion point of mine is the channels that will start expanding are ones like chat, which are more and more immersive. And how can we ensure that we create like the immersive experiences outside of our comfort zone, right? So those are the five things I think about as how our industry or how the marketing industry will evolve. And then is the omni-channel pharma industry going to be able to keep up?
Yeah, the landscape is rich with opportunity, I think, with some of these new tools and technology. And I think really liked what you said about it's becoming more democratized. Like the technology is no longer prohibitive. It's much more accessible to everyone. So understanding how our industry will leverage that is going to be a very exciting frontier. So Thomas, tell us your thoughts.
Oh yeah. Fortunately, Donna, I have a crystal ball, so I can
I
read
thought
from.
so.
Yeah. Yeah, building off what Gaurav is saying, actually, I also anticipate that we will be even more productive with all the AI tools being more predictive, being more analytical, and we will finally become a data-rich industry as well. Also, I expect that even with Omnichannel, we'll be moving more and more towards self-consumption or self-service, because I simply think it's a generation trend. And together with self-service, self-consumption, it will inevitably lead into a change in the role of commercial and medical. And I believe that on the horizon is the era that commercial and medical will merge into a consultant professional within a pharma industry, facilitating and being really a high level and high value partner to the HCP.
I think, I think I would love to see a world where that happens, where, we're able to just understand the HCP and deliver on their needs, no matter what arm of the organization we're part of, right? Because that's really HCP centric, right? But I think, I don't know how close that world is, Thomas, but it's very interesting perspective. Gaurav, it looked like maybe you had a comment about that.
No, I was just agreeing with what you said.
Yeah. Wonderful. Well, there certainly is a lot that I'm excited about that I kind of touched on. And certainly for me, I think the future is really this analytics and AI integration, but how we're really going to harness the power of that for just being able to adapt so quickly, even in real time, to things we're seeing in the landscape. Right now, it's very clunky, I think, to say the least. But I think that to me is probably what I'm most excited about, because that will make us much more of a relevant partner and seen as that trusted partner as well. So I only see that growing over the next few years. So gentlemen, we have a number of questions, and I'm going to, I apologize that we may not get to all of them, but I I really love this question that was submitted, and this is and it's something in my current role that I am thinking about. So I'd love some advice from both of you. How do you strike the right balance between exploring new channels and innovations while ensuring optimization and maximizing kind of what you already have? So that introducing new versus optimizing. How do you balance that?
I think everyone's willing to go and answer this. So I'm going to maybe Thomas, you were about to speak, so I'm going to let you go first.
Okay. Well, trying out new things is always a push, right? It always comes from parts of the organization which somehow raises the bar and experiments. So I don't have an answer to that. I would say that every year, every period, we have to have something new to try out, to stay competitive and to explore. I don't know whether it is 90% to 10, whatever, but keeping exploring is staying competitive and staying ahead of the curve. That's my comment.
Gaurav, anything else to add?
Yeah, I mean, the only point I would want to add is, I think like if we are in the business of omnichannel marketing, whether it's medical or commercial, it's very important for us to be where the customer is, right? And I feel some of the challenges are our own internal challenges. And if the customer is on a different platform and we are not able to move fast enough as an industry, that's on the industry, right? And I think the point is we have to really be agile to respond to the changing needs. And I think, these are not shiny toys. I would say, there are many shiny toys out there. I can name a few. Um, I'm not saying we try the shiny toys, and you'll know, right? You meet the HCP and you know that they're not on the shiny toy. They're basically on their phone, they're on their laptop, they're listening to a podcast, they're talking to someone. They're basically they're doing 4 or 5 things at the same time, and we need to find a way to engage in that world. So we just need to be really keep tuned in and be pragmatic about it. This is not about doing innovation for the sake of innovation.
Yeah, I think you're balancing those bright shiny things that seem great and really defining what is the value of that bright shiny thing and the feasibility of introducing it across the enterprise. That can be a difficult decision, but it's right, there has to be a balance. And I think the longer I'm in the industry, I realize that those traditional, everyone has a phone, everyone has email, everyone and everyone searches on Google, right? Those are the bread and butter. And then there are additional things we explore, but it has to be kind of balanced in the right areas depending on your particular situation. So it's not an easy question to answer, but there are lots of considerations. And I guess actually this is sort of related to that. We talked a lot about change management and how that being vital to introducing different approaches, getting the cross-functional team on board, et cetera. I kind of just wanted to hear some thoughts about how you manage or what some good approaches for change management are in your organizations. So Thomas, why don't we start with you?
Yeah. Regarding change management, there are proven concepts of how to approach change management in any project, virtually. Right? So sticking to those principles, which are inclusiveness, right? To co-creation is one of the keys. Another key is over-communicating, and the third key is, just to name 3, is to adjust the messages to the audience and to understanding the needs. And I would to each of those critical and strategic projects, I would invite an expert in change management, helping actually the team to come across with the ideas and to get it right. It's worth.
Yeah, sure. Yes, I've tried. There are some defined approaches, but it's sort of like you have to figure out, you have to know your audience. That is the
Yeah.
biggest one that I've seen being the most important, right? Gaurav, do you agree?
Yeah, and I take a slightly different approach to change management because I think we kind of use change management as we need to drive change itself, but I think it's solving a problem. And every company is going through any different kinds of problems. You need to identify what the problem is. We need to bring the right stakeholders as well as the business on the table right from day one. Whether it's your GMs, your commercial leaders, your medical leaders, you need to bring the key stakeholders on the table, define the problem, co-create the solution, get the experts, as Thomas said. But then once you agree on what the change is, you need to really deploy that, right? It cannot be, there's no optionality to change. You have to be very decisive about change. Otherwise, it's a huge waste of effort and time. And I've seen this company spend a lot of time, we want to change this tool and we want to move this, migrate this platform. If it creates zero value for the business, right? If I'm sitting in a market and I'm a GM and saying like, what value is this going to create for me? And if you don't have an answer, there's no reason to drive that change, right? So I feel we need to be a lot more focused on what is the intent of the change we're driving versus just change for change itself.
Yeah, very, very, very good point. Very good point.
Yeah.
And the what's in it for them part of the story that's communicated is vital, I think, to any of these situations that I've been involved in. Okay, let's shift gears a little bit and talk a little bit. I have one that maybe I'll save. It's one of my favorites as well. But I guess so we talked a little bit about personalization all the way at the beginning. And pharma's traditionally been one-to-many type of communications, and now we're trying, we're being a little bit more targeted with our communications. And so this particular question of which N value is realistic when going for personalization, is N equals one even realistic? So whoever wants to start to kick that off. Gaurav, I know that you had commented on the personalization, so why don't we start with you? That's okay.
Yeah, sure. No, I feel N equals one is very hard, right? It's very hard today. And the reason why it's hard is because I don't think we are leveraging, as an industry, I don't think we're leveraging technology to its full extent. It's easy if you leverage technology. It's hard if you do it manually, right? Imagine, like, you can't do this, million times. You have to find a way to do it a few times, and then the machine starts enabling the personalization. And it might not be N equals one. It might be N equals 50. It might be N equals 20. It might be N equals 10. So I would say I'm not that obsessed about N equals one for personalization. I'm obsessed about till what extent it drives an impact. And after that, if it has diminishing returns, let's stop over investing and over optimizing. Because sometimes I feel like as marketeers, we take ourselves very seriously. We fall in love with our own theory of, oh, I want to drive personalization, and go right to the extent that it doesn't drive value, right? So I think we need to really, again, be uh, outcome oriented. And we really need to do the graph and see, okay, so if I'm doing N equals 50, is it still driving prescription growth? If I'm doing N equals 30, is it still driving further growth? If the growth stops, I think we need to put our efforts where it really matters versus kind of over obsess on the concept.
Yeah, and I think you sort of hit on something for me. I think we do become wrapped around the axle sometimes with the theory. I think one personal example is defining maybe too many personas, to try to with limited differentiation to action on, right? At some point, a persona is only as good as what you can action on, right? So that exercise of everything about this particular persona, I've sort of moved away from a bit because I don't find that activity to do it to the nth degree to be really productive. And so it's funny, I totally agree with you that it has to be about like diminishing returns, right? At some point, this is, you know, what we have available to us in our infrastructure, and this is the best way to do it based on what we have. So Thomas, please tell us your thoughts.
Oh, personalization, very interesting topic. And I'm gonna share here my hands-on experience with why I finally felt that we arrived at personalization. And that was when implementing the customer experience program. It was kind of a bit longer journey than I expected. However, I really started feeling that it changed our behavior. Asking proactively for a feedback from the customer, and that feedback drove change in behavior, was something in the end I called personalization. Once you know what the customer wants, once you go beyond the personas, as you named those, we might have 5, 10, 7, I don't know how many personas, but it's not really the personalization. Personalization is really having a specific one-on-one understanding of the customer expectations, what the gap is, and how to fix the gap and act up on the gap. And this is where I believe, as a pharma, we start looking into the customer experience program quite massively, but still we have huge potential in implementing that approach. And I call success a day when a salesperson or sales member of the sales team wakes up in the morning, skims through the customer database, and says, okay, this customer has not provided the feedback yet. I need to check out what is going on. This is the personalization.
Yes, no, I look forward to that. I think there's a lot of opportunity there. But again, I think it comes down to where we want to make those investments and where, you know, what the strategy drives us to do. So I think we have time for one more question. And this might be, I don't know, this one is, I don't know, chicken or the egg. What comes first, the channel or the content? So, I mean, I know from my perspective, we often have this discussion of, well, we have this great piece of content, so let's figure out which channel to put it on and to reach our audience, correct? But I do think that I would like to get to a place where we understand the channel mix and we're designing content maybe around with that strategy in mind that specifically suits the channel in a bit of a more strategic way than sometimes happens. So I'm just sort of interested in kind of, is it the content you have first and then, or is it the channel you want to use to reach that audience? How do you kind of think about that whole process? So I guess I'll start with Gaurav, please.
Yeah, so I'll just I think what comes first is your customer, followed by your strategy, followed by your content, followed by your channel. And I'll tell you why that the content needs to come first, because I think if you have good content, and I always think about like your, you know, our iPad assets, you know, different companies call it differently, but it is so complete and holistic that it covers everything that you possibly need to cover, right? It has your claim, it has your safety information, it has your competitive information, it has, you know, the prescription information, everything that you possibly need from a brand standpoint. That can easily be repurposed. I mean, you tell me like which channel we can't repurpose. You can take a claim and put it in a WhatsApp. You can take a you know, something and put it on a LinkedIn post. You can create a podcast out of your long form. So the thing is, I feel like the channel is how you package your content, but your content needs to be initially channel agnostic for it to then work across channels.
Okay, great. And Thomas, a quick comment for you before I hand back to Noah.
Actually, I also think that the content comes first, and then it's adjusted based on customer preference to the channel.
Great. Yeah, thank you so much, everyone, for such an insightful discussion. And I think we're at time. I really want to thank everyone for just this enjoyable time we spent together. And I'll pass it back to Noah to close us out.
Thank you very much, Donna. Yeah, thank you so much to the panel, especially for such an insightful conversation. I certainly enjoyed it, and I'm hoping all the 270 people who attended live also did. Yeah, lots of really interesting questions. Unfortunately, we couldn't address them all. Apologies for that, but yeah, we were pretty pressed for time. As I said at the top of the session, please look out for that follow-up email with the brochures for our 2 flagship events in North America and Europe. Wherever you are in the world, I really hope you enjoyed the discussion, and I hope you have a lovely rest of your day. Thank you very much.